The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss a legal matter. Public comment on non-agenda items will be pushed to the end of the presentation. This is a one-topic meeting. There will be a presentation of the proposed TND. It's the Paoli Pike Goshenville Traditional Neighborhood Development Overlay. The purpose, the intent of this meeting is to get input from the supervisors and from the public. And so after the presentation, there will be time for public comment and public questions, but I'm going to request that you hold off your questions and comments until after the presentation. We're hoping to end this at 9 o'clock, so we will work toward that end. Okay, Mark?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, board members. So we're here tonight to discuss the East Goshen Township Traditional Neighborhood Development District Overlay. That is the topic of the night, and we'll begin with the first slide there, a brief history of Paoli Pike, beginning eons ago. But in the last 100 years, we have a short history up there on the slide, basically starting with the current Pepper Mill, which was a arcade dance hall where they had functions, all the way down to the most recent development in the area, the TD Bank, and before that, the CVS. So there's been a whole lot of different development along the pike over the years. Albrecht's Nurseries, and if you've been here a long time would remember, that's where the CVS is, the Swiss Farms station in the township, and it had several different names over the years, Atlantic, Richfield, Esso. So a lot of history on the pike there, but development has been very random and hasn't been planned. So the TND ordinance provides a framework for the future of the Goshenville area and Paoli Pike. So how did we get here? We got here through a lot of planning. So planning started and has influenced this traditional neighborhood development ordinance from back in about 2012. We started talking about a trail along Paoli Pike, and that was originally set out in the Central Chester County Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, which is a joint plan of a number of municipalities and the county. East Goshen was involved in that and identified Paoli Pike as a corridor for a bicycle and pedestrian trail. In 2015, there was a Parks and Recs, East Goshen Park and Rec Open Space Plan update. And in 2015, we also did the East Goshen Township Comprehensive Plan. We do a comprehensive plan update at least every 10 years. That's required by the Municipal Planning Code. In 2016, we did a Paoli Pike Trail Master Plan, and in 2017, the Paoli Pike Corridor Master Plan. So the comp plan identified a number of high-level strategic things the township wants to cover down on. One of those was to transform the town center into a walkable area and a visitable place. Transform the Paoli Pike corridor into a connected artery and increase pedestrian circulation along Paoli Pike. And for the most part, that promotes the importance of neighborhood connections to the Paoli Pike Trail. The corridor master plan that I mentioned had the main theme was to make Paoli Pike a destination. To do that, we were going to connect people to the Paoli Pike Trail, calm traffic along Paoli Pike corridor, enhance the Goshenville to support commerce and promote connectivity, and activate the corridor with programming, events, encourage people to walk, bike, create, shop, and enjoy Peoria Pike in the Goshenville area. So those are the two main planning efforts that really identified how Peoria Pike could be transformed. The Board of Supervisors then tasked the Planning Commission, the East Goshen Township Planning Commission, to develop and the Goshenville Overlay District, which was a high-level priority in the comprehensive plan. That ordinance took over a year of planning with the Planning Commission, a number of sessions with the public, a number of sessions with our consultants, and some working group meetings, and the result is the Peoria Pike Corridor, the proposed TND 1 and 2 Overlay District ordinance. So what does the TND ordinance do? First, it combines 5 separate zoning districts into one overlay. So all those underlying zoning districts, from residential to commercial to business park, will have an overlay that kind of brings them together, has a joint vision for this area. Creates consistency, creates more efficient use of land by encouraging integrated mixed uses, extends housing opportunities, creates pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods and public spaces, creates streetscape presence, allows for a diversity of uses, and fosters a sense of place. The TND ordinance consists of basically 2 components: the zoning ordinance amendment and the subdivision and land development ordinance amendment. So the zoning ordinance outlines the permitted uses, setbacks, and that type of thing. The subdivision ordinance outlines, how close, how the streets are laid out, how the parking lots are laid out, landscaping, and other design standards throughout the overlay. So how many districts are in the TND ordinance? Initially, the draft identified 1 overlay for the whole area. And then early on in one of our public outreach, some community members came to a meeting and expressed concerns about commercial backing right up onto their neighborhood. The Planning Commission listened, was very receptive, and thought it made great sense to partition out the commercial from those ends of the TND. So we have in this plan 2 TND segments, TND 1 and TND 2. So TND 1, which comprised of the middlemost portion, and this map will show that area. So you can see from the left-hand side of the screen where the Sunoco gas station and the Goshen Executive Center are. That's the westernmost limit of the TND 1, and it stretches out to include CBS, the Goshen Village Shopping Center, the Township Building, the Cyber Charter School across the street, the former M&T Bank, and the Wawa and former Swiss Farms on the eastern side. So that's the TND 1, primarily commercial zoning in this district, commercial and business park, with the exception of the CBS, which is technically R2 zoning, but the rest of it is all commercial and business park zoning in the TND 1 currently. So within the TND 1, a little bit of background. I explained those properties there. There's a couple of residential properties in there as well. The Diobundo property, which sits across from the M&T branch, and then the Cinquette property, which is right next to the Wawa. I think the rest of these you're familiar with. So permitted uses in the TND 1, and I'm going to ask Kristen, our township solicitor, to give a little brief overview of uses by right and uses by conditional use.
So in the zoning ordinance, the board, Sorry. Pretty loud person. There are different ways to characterize uses that are allowed in zoning ordinances. And the first is by right, which means that that use is allowed. There's typically no specific criteria other than maybe area and bulk requirements. And if that is the use proposed, the zoning officer has the ability to issue a zoning permit for that use. That's the end of it. The analysis is at the zoning officer stage. The next type of use is a use that's permitted by conditional use, which requires a public hearing process by this board. Only the governing body can grant conditional uses after a public hearing process. And in those conditional use hearings, property owners who own property in close proximity have the ability to come and request to be a party to that hearing. And there's a legal burden that the applicant has to demonstrate the criteria in the ordinance, and then the neighbors or the protestants have the ability to show that that particular use could have a detrimental impact. So there's a legal standard and a legal process to have to go through. But a conditional use means that the board made a legislative decision that that use is appropriate in that district, provided that the standards of the ordinance are met, and that that particular, for example, if it was a shopping center, that particular shopping center on that property was not going to have a more detrimental impact than you would ordinarily see from a shopping center. So that's the burden under a conditional use. The third type of use that can be in a zoning ordinance is a special exception use, and that same legal standard, but the governing body or the judge, so to speak, who grants special exception is the Township Zoning Hearing Board. So some uses, a lot of times, religious uses oftentimes in zoning ordinances are approved through a special exception process. So those would be the three ways that use can be characterized under zoning districts.
Thank you, Kristen. And just to be clear, we don't have any special exception uses in the TND district. They're all uses by right and conditional uses. So those uses by right, but in fact, all of these except for one currently exist within the districts that exist today, with the one exception, fast food restaurant without drive-through. Currently, that's not permitted in the C2, C5, or BP, the area in the TND1, but it's being added. The Planning Commission believed that that was a good use to add. No drive-through, so your typical Chick-fil-A or Arby's restaurant would not fit into that because they typically want a drive-through. But all these uses exist today, will also be carried over into the TND1. So the second page is also use by right. The list from public library all the way down to wireless communications facility, those are all uses that exist today in the district. Those will be carried over into the TND1. And then some added uses, beginning with artisan shop, outdoor dining, dwelling units above the ground floor. And what we envision there is first floor commercial with residential rental units above along the TND1, and township park and recreational areas. And those are identified to be open space, pedestrian gathering areas along the corridor. And then pop-up uses would be for art show or some kind of craft fair or something like that in the TND1. And that would be a use by right in the TND1. So conditional uses in the TND1, Kristen explained for you how the conditional use would go about. It have to be approved by the board, and they would come in and say, Mark, I want to do a building containing more than one commercial or office establishment, like a shopping center. Okay, here's the conditional use application, complete it, and we'll start the process, schedule meetings and hearings, and go through the process. So all these would have to follow that procedure. So like a new shopping center, a public utility facility, if you've been paying attention, we recently did one with Pico up on 352, a child daycare, an adult daycare, cyber charter school campus, which is currently allowed. All these are currently allowed today in the district. Apartments is also a conditional use, which is a new use in the TND1. And then again, dwelling units above ground floor commercial uses is also new, and beverage cafe is existing. We have a Dunkin' Donuts right next door, and that would also be allowed throughout the TND1. So on the next slide here, you see our a table of the area and bulk requirements. So what would happen is for non-residential use, the property itself, the physical limitations of property would have to meet these minimum standards: 20,000 square feet in the area. You can't have buildings that exceed 40% of the lot area. Total impervious, including parking and driveways, couldn't exceed 65%. So I think you get the idea. The maximum height of the building would be 3 stories and 40 feet for non-residential uses, and just 40 feet for residential. And the reason we did that, the Planning Commission believed that 40 feet, leave it up to the developer to determine what size floors they want. If they want 3-story building with 12-foot ceilings, because that's what their customer wants, then they'll meet the 40. They'll meet the 40. If they want a 4-story building that has 9-foot ceilings, then they meet what the ordinance requires as well. So it gives some flexibility to the developer in that case. And then the build to line, which is a new segment of the new standard in the ordinance, is basically going to be a 15-foot setback from the street right of way or the trail right of way, whichever is greater. So if buildings would be set back 15 feet, that seems fairly close, right? But the idea is to be close to the trail so that we can facilitate and encourage pedestrian use, pedestrian type uses, activate and get people off the trail into the uses, on and off the trail, and put parking behind the buildings. So parking right up against the road is sometimes intrusive. We can't park on PLA Pike. So if we were to put the parking behind these buildings, the Planning Commission felt that this was in best keeping to try to keep the character of a traditional neighborhood development. A map of the TND2. So that was the TND1. Now we'll talk about the TND2, which is on the western and eastern sides of the district overlay. And these areas are primarily residential, not primarily, but all residential. And it comprises of, I think, 3 or 4 properties. Actually, a little more than 5. So the Parental property, which is on the western side, across from the Sunoco and the Goshen Executive Center. It's a little bitty house up on top of the hill. It's about 15 acres on the south side of Paley Pike. And then as you come east, the other 4 properties, the other 3 properties, Paracas property, East Goshen Bible Church, and the Goshen Friends are located on the eastern side, as John just pointed out there. So these are the 2 areas that Planning Commission believed made more sense to remove commercial uses from and keep them solely as residential uses in the TND2. So those uses by right are single-family detached dwellings, which is currently allowed today, semi-detached dwellings, which is allowed on the Paracas property today, but not on the Parental property, because the Paracas property is currently red zoned R3. Group homes, which is currently allowed, forestry, which we have to allow in any district. It's a state law. Townhomes is new for both, and townhomes would be designed as per the township ordinance for townhomes. We have a full township section in the zoning ordinance for townhome development, and it's a minimum of 3 units per building and a maximum of 6. And then, of course, township park recreational areas, similar to what's permitted in the TND1. Those uses in the TND2 by conditional use are place of worship or church, public or private primary school, which are currently allowed, and public utility facility. All these 3 are the same. They're currently allowed today in these districts and are just going to be carried over into the TND2. The area bulk requirements in the TND2, I'd like to show you similar to TND1. Gives you the maximum or the minimum lot area required, the minimum side yards, minimum lot area. For townhomes, it breaks down the differences there. Single family, it's broken down differently, and single family semi-detached. So those are twins. So when we have a twin type of development, they would have a little bit different lot area requirement than single family homes. And again, the build-to line in the TND2 is 20 feet, and that was to give a little bit more area for to get the homes off the road a little bit more, so that there's a little bit more front yard type of appeal, more room for pedestrian access and any kind of park or streetscape. The TND subdivision ordinance has a number of design elements to it, and some different streetscape and curb cuts. So all the development of the TND will be designed to meet and reflect consistent design standards. We've developed some design standards in the ordinance that will address the legislative intent of the development standards, the overview and key design elements, the building design and proportions, parking locations and requirements, curb cuts, street walls, drive-through facilities, any internal street network if it's a larger development, larger residential development, and then pedestrian gathering areas, street lights and landscaping. All those are identified in the design standards. So some frequently asked questions that we've already received from residents and different folks who have reviewed the ordinance are, what happens once this ordinance is adopted? Well, like any ordinance, it becomes effective and it's on the books. But nothing happens until someone or a property owner or a developer purchases a property and wants to develop it. So at that point, you know, they have options in the ordinance. They can look at the ordinance and determine what use is best for what they want to do. Most of the times they find a property, they know they're going to purchase it, they have some intention. The ordinance is there to guide those developers on what's permitted and what's required of them should they want to go to the conditional use and not just use the uses by right. So whenever new regulations take effect, and they'll take effect on new existing non-residential buildings when they're enlarged by more than 20%, whenever the use of the building is changed, whenever a vacant lot is developed, and whenever existing building is demolished and a new building is proposed. So one last point is everybody who's in the district now, who's conducting a business or a home, none of that changes. They have that right to continue that use in perpetuity until it's no longer being used for that. So they have that right. It doesn't go away. They become a legal, non-conforming use and can continue that use. They even have rights to expand that legal non-conformity within the limits of the law. So any one of the uses along this district today can continue to exist and has rights just like all property owners have. So what are the next steps? Currently, there are no vacant lots in the TND1 or TND2. The township is not aware of any plans or any developers that are seeking to develop any properties. This was solely a planning exercise to cover down on initiatives that were identified during our comprehensive plan. And one of those was to develop an overlay district for the Goshenville Town Center. And that's what the board and the planning commission sought out to do. And that's what we have before you tonight. There are opportunities for development. We believe there are some that may be sooner than others. If you haven't noticed, the M&T Bank has moved out. Those farms is closed. And those two could be, first to go, first to get redeveloped. Maybe another bank comes in and moves right in. It doesn't change anything. That could happen as well. And there are a couple of single family residences that may take an opportunity now with these new uses to take advantage of those opportunities. We believe that future development is likely to occur piecemeal, slowly. This isn't going to happen overnight, but to achieve the goals, we have to start somewhere. And you start with a clear framework that allows developers and property owners to know what is possible with their properties. So with that, we need to start somewhere. So we have a draft ordinance for the board to consider and some overview of those possible locations I just mentioned. So if you see to the left is the Perano property. That shows a residential development that's in the TND 1. And I'll just step away from point this out for you. So John's pointing to the Perano property on the western side. As you come across, you'll see that buildings that are in red are existing. So the first one there is the Dunkin' Donuts. That shows kind of a reconfiguration of the shopping center. It's kind of a what if, what could happen kind of scenario. You can see the Township Public Works building in the district court that's existing. Shows another building next to it, closer to the road, all the parking in the rear. Down from that, you see the existing township building that remains the same. As you go down the road, now M&T, that gets moved closer to the road. Maybe there's two buildings there. As you go down, you see the Cinquit property that could move closer to the road as well as the Wawa, Swiss Farms, and Peppermill triangle so that could all get reconfigured. I don't anticipate the Goshen meeting doing anything, and we didn't in this scenario either. The Paracas property in the TND2 here shows a residential development plan, very similar to one that was considered a number of years ago, but never was built. And then across the street, it shows a residential development plan behind the Goshen Bible Church. These are all just guesses. These are larger properties that we thought, we'll do a development plan to look at what's a kind of an analysis of what the yield would be with this new ordinance. So that kind of lays out a little bit. And then two I forgot to mention were the Sunoco and the CVS, bringing those closer to the corner, allowing parking in the rear. These are all what ifs, something that could happen and not necessarily will happen, but just showing what the ordinance would allow. So with that, we have a conceptual rendering that is in 3D. Our township intern that we've had, Gabrielle Long, she's done a very good job of quick turnaround in some GIS platform that we didn't have the skill set in, but she does. She's a master's candidate at Westchester University. She couldn't be here tonight, but this rendering shows what the M&T Bank site, the Cinquet property, and the D'Ambundo property could look like if they were developed under the TND ordinance. It's a 3D modeling done in GIS software. So with that, John is going to try and launch it and get it to work.
Okay. So this, let me see if I remember this, what we're showing. So I'm going to close the, give me a second. Come on, John, you do this.
John, if it doesn't work, kick it.
You take it. Oh, wait, here we go.
I don't feel it.
Oh, now we've got the blue screen of that. Wait, give me 1 second. This happened before we figured out how to fix it. Display settings. I'll get, no, I get this. Ah, okay, now we're gonna get real. Off your stuff, right? Okay. So,
Okay, so this is gonna start to spin here a little bit. So as you see on the right-hand side, that's a mock-up of the East Goshen Township building with East Goshen Elementary behind it. This is the M&T Bank site with a cafe use, a restaurant type use. And we're flying over the Diabundo property with a residential use, and you're looking at the Cinquette property with a residential use. This would be the commercial with residential above. And we're gonna try to fly around here, and what you're looking at there, that green color building is the Wawa, the Peppermill behind it, Bentley building, and now the Diabundo property in the, straight ahead across the street. And this is the Pennsylvania, the PA Leadership Charter School, again, the Diabundo property, and phasing out to the end. So I'm not sure why we're getting all that other chatter in there.
it's called.
That one was good. Could you put that one?
So gives you kind of just a real broad brush, a very cursory look of what could happen. Obviously, township building, nothing's changed. Here, the M&T is now a commercial use, and the Diabundo property is now a residential, multifamily residential. The Cinquette property is multifamily residential with commercial on the first floor. No changes were shown for the Wawa, the Bentley building, and no changes for the Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School. We added a couple of those to give some depth, some scale to the model. So, I want to thank Gabby for her hard work on that to give us kind of a rendering of what we're working on. So with that, turn it back over to Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. First I will open the, don't leave. Okay.
Answer question?
First, and does the board have any questions?
I do. Mark, I believe in the concept, but I also believe what we've been going back and forth for in the past couple of weeks, which is, I'm not tall enough, but number one, preserving the past. You lived and almost died by this. Serving the present, protecting the future. I guess my only question for this entire TND district, I understand it's responsible development and the parties involved doing this have the best intent for East Goshen Township and the residents. My question, by doing this and creating the ordinance, are we going to potentially open a door for a problem development coming in that's going to find sort of a loophole to a very good proposal and end up possibly giving us something that is going to be a detriment to this corridor?
So I think I like your comment about preserving the past, because the design standards are very modest. They're very tasteful. I think it would improve the current architecture along the corridor. To serve the present, I think this would address a lot of the comments we've heard from our folks during the public input, all throughout those 5 planning processes that I mentioned. was all about connectivity. Connectivity, get to the park, get to school, be able to ride and get an ice cream on my bike with my kids, be able to ride home safely. This is the first step for that, to serve the present and protect the future. I think that it also provides for additional uses, additional amenities that will set us apart and make us as competitive as possible. And for those folks who want to come live here, those folks are looking for great amenities, and I think that this ordinance can address all those. Will we have a developer come in and try to use whatever tools they have to maybe get around something? Maybe. In our experience, my experience, we're very open. We work with developers. We talk to them from the very beginning before they even have pen to paper. So I can imagine that that would be I don't think that would be a scenario that I would anticipate.
The last part of my question, what I'm not interested in this ordinance doing is allowing a conglomerate of Marty Shane Incorporated coming in, buying multiple properties and ending up with something like some neighboring townships might have at Matlack Street and 202 or 352 and 30, or, you know, some areas where you end up with a mammoth building because we allowed a combination of lots, a developer or an entity to come in and combine numerous lots and have enough area and bulk regulation that we could end up with something like that. Where's our protection for that?
Well, I don't know of any protection that wouldn't allow someone to come buy a number of properties and then use the ordinance and then set up however meets our ordinance requirements.
But Corbin, one thing Mark did mention is there's a 50-foot buffer separation between any of these properties and the rear. So if it abuts residential to the back, there's a 50-foot buffer, which is the same buffer you already have now in the corporate park.
Yep, perimeter buffer adjoining residential districts is 50 feet. So that would help to buffer the existing uses.
And I think, I think we discussed before, I mean, the likelihood of the Diabunda property, I mean, and Mr. Diabunda is not, I don't know what use the word old, but you know, he's not old. And Carlos and Quinn they're not, I use the word elderly people. So the likelihood of somebody buying in the Leadership Charter School and the Bentley Building and combining them, I mean, it's possible. But the probability is probably slim if somebody's going to be able to afford to buy all those properties and combine.
But there's nothing that
You're
prohibits that.
correct.
So
Yeah, something-
what,
yeah.
and I just want to make a point. You asked Mark of how do we make sure we protect against things we might not want. You as a board have to be comfortable with the uses that are allowed, number one, and the area and bulk requirements that they'd be permitted to have. So there's nothing we can do to stop somebody buying 5 parcels in a row and reverse subdividing them and then building to meet these area and bulk requirements. So if you want Tom to draw that out for you of what that would look like using these area and bulk requirements, I think that's something you want to visualize and see, but you have to be comfortable with that because you can't stop that.
Is there, since this is a new ordinance as the overlay district, since our planner would be developing this basically from scratch, along with the planning commission and all the work that's been done, can the uses be tweaked if we're not comfortable with them now from the get-go, so that you can have, I can only think of a percentage where you can only have such a percentage of a certain amount of thing, so much commercial and so much residential, and not to exceed it on that
Well,
property.
you're gonna get to that with the area and bulk requirements, because there's a maximum height limitation, there's a maximum dwelling unit per acre limitation. I mean, they're built into that already.
So each lot, has a maximum amount that it can be developed. Now, if they bought up a bunch of, will we get a larger building? Probably, but it still has the same density requirements set in the ordinance.
And Mark, can I just make sure I'm clear on this, because I know there was discussions along the way. The current proposal is to have it be an overlay. So the underlying zoning is not going away.
That's
That's
correct.
still the way it is. So that was a point that was sort of missed, that right now, Mark indicated there are 5 different zoning districts that the property that's being considered to be either TND1 overlay or TND2 overlay. It's not that those 5 zoning districts go away, and now this property is just zoned TND1 or TND2. An overlay is like an additional use opportunity, basically. So somebody coming in and say, I'm just gonna use an example, this property's not for sale. I'm gonna buy this thing, but let's do it this way. I'm gonna buy the M&T Bank property, because that potentially may be for sale, right? And I'm gonna look at is that zone C2?
Yes.
So I'm gonna look at the C2 regulations, those still remain in effect. And as Mark said, somebody could come in, another bank could come in, just turnkey and come in and be the bank that's there today, there's nothing we can change about it. Or they can come in and say, you know what, there's no more banks that I need in East Goshen, I'm gonna build a beverage cafe like the Dunkin' Donuts. Well, that's something else that's allowed in the C2 district. So you would look at the C2 district today, the uses that are allowed and the area bulks that are allowed. They'll still be able to do what they can do today. Or if they want additional use opportunities or to build to a different design, they can look at the TND1 regulations and choose to go down that path. But the board has to be comfortable. And again, the uses, there's really nothing, the planning commission spent a lot of time going over what would be appropriate uses, and they didn't change a lot. These underlying uses are uses that would be allowed in these districts already.
In the TND1, the 2 new uses are apartments over residential. That's
Over commercial.
Over commercial. That's allowed, and the apartment use.
Yep.
The other stuff is all currently allowed today.
And if I may, that's a good segue, Rick. I'd like to ask a question to make
Those
sure.
are the conditional uses that are new.
Yes, okay.
There are uses by right that are new. Artisan shop, outdoor dining, dwelling units above ground floor commercial, and township
You got
parking.
that in 2 places, Mark.
Now,
The apartments over commercial, you
Yes,
have in
wow.
2 places, one is a right and one by condition.
There's some fine tuning.
So we do
Oh,
need
that's
to work on this.
probably a cut and paste.
all right, so I'd like to ask a question, Mark, if you can, and I don't know whether if I'm on the right base here, if we brought up the map of the TND1, that is listed as number 9 here on our Northern grant. My question is this: on the western side of the TND1, which TND1, as Rick just indicated, will permit apartments by conditional use. It looks to me like there is a bleed, if you will, of the TND1 going west from the Sunoco gas station into the business park district. And I thought we just concluded a public meeting about apartments in the business park district. Am I off base here, or am
It's the
I
executive center.
in the
Yes.
executive center?
That's the Goshen Executive Center. It is zoned business park.
Yeah.
So now we would be back to where we just finished up in
Well,
possibly
no.
permitting apartments.
The area bulks are much
Okay.
different.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah, the area-
Easy.
Executive
Easy.
center.
That's
Yeah.
fine. I'm trying to get clarification, that's all.
No, this has no connection to what we did last week.
Well, but this does cover part of the business park
Yes.
district.
This started
Yep.
in 2018.
And this is
And it-
indicating
and
that
it-
apartments
and it-
could be permitted there in the
Yes.
business park district.
The Goshen Executive Center, if all the owners in there got together and decided to sell it, then they could put apartments there. Yes,
In the
yes, yeah, that all was
Okay.
yes.
Is that all from the board? I'd like
And the
to
apartment
open,
standards would apply.
yeah, I'd like to open it up to the public. Okay, the way we'll do this, since it is being recorded, if you wish to speak, you have to come up and speak in the microphone, give your name and address, and then, make your comments. So whenever.
Good evening. My name is Paul Canavan. I live at 1652 Elbridge in the Boat View subdivision. And about probably a little over a year and a half ago, I attended one of these meetings. They were discussing, as part of this project, at least I thought it was part of this project, creating neighborhood access to the existing trails that, but food road.
That's a different project.
Okay, that's all, that's what, that would answer my question. Okay, that's it. Talk about it another time.
We have a lot of projects. We're very busy.
Marie Caddy, 630 Meadow Drive. I'm really here to get some clarifications on some of these areas. So Mike was just asking about where the corporate park was, and I'm looking at the map. All right, I guess to Mike's point, one of the things that we did talk about last week, and about the Lewis property, and about a lot of these other properties, what I'm hearing from township residents, they don't want, what's the best word I'm looking for? Apartments, they don't want townhomes, they don't want population density to increase. And I've been hearing that theme running through pretty much everything we've been talking about. So I'm going to Mike's point on this, is that I want a little bit of clarification for me personally. Where are we going to be allowing new development of apartments, and what properties within this TD1, TND1, TND2 already have the ability to become a high density housing, such as apartments and townhomes? Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to clarify what is what would be coming under the new proposed, and what already exists that can have those things. So can you show me that already? Because yeah.
Sure. So apartments are not permitted.
You need,
Or you gotta say,
you gotta, okay.
So currently, apartments are not permitted in the TND1 or TND2. So apartments will be
What you
allowed.
mean by that is the underlying districts today.
Right.
So those districts
So
don't
under
exist.
today,
Yeah, currently-
if the Tandy Bank area were to go down today, that could not become an apartment building. It
Yes.
could become commercial. Question for that then is, we've said in this that a commercial building could have apartments above, a dwelling above it. Does the dwelling above it mean a single family, or does the dwelling above it mean multifamily?
Going to be multifamily.
So we are opening the door up to high density housing.
Depends on how you define high density.
Well, okay,
Not the
apartment-
density that Hankin was proposing.
Well, this is true,
It's
but so,
it's multifamily. It would be, it would fall under the multifamily category of building code. So yes, there would be apartments above, but at a density of no more than 16 per acre. Right now is what's proposed.
okay, now you clear that up. So I got Sunoco Road there, and I don't know the names of these properties, but the property that is, all right, if you're looking at where the Sunoco is, and there's Paoli Pike, go west, right there. Is that part of, into this? Is that the,
That is part of the TND2. So I can put that map up. We can talk about that. So John, it's
all right, yeah, so
That's
on
the
the
Perano
TND,
properties.
that's Perano, okay. On
about
the TND
15 acres.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's beautiful property.
Yep.
So within that property, what, under current zoning, what can go in there? And under the proposed zoning, what can go in there?
So currently that is R2, single family residential, 1 acre minimum per dwelling unit. So you get a maximum of 15 with probably a little less than that because of streets, stormwater, street right of ways have to come out, all that type of stuff. But it's 1 dwelling per acre maximum, and it's about a 15-acre parcel.
Okay, so under the proposed, what could go in there?
So under the proposed, you could put townhomes. The townhome section. This one.
John, can you go to the slide that shows the uses in the TND?
4 per acre. It's 4 per acre for town.
Okay, 4 per acre.
Okay, so that clarifies, and all of those
So
in
you're
the
40, what,
TD2.
60 units.
Okay, and all of the ones in the TD2, that property, then the other property, was 2 other properties in there that you showed, they all could then potentially become townhomes.
So,
if we change the zoning.
Yes.
so we've got the Paracas property here. So that can currently be single family or semi-detached dwellings, twins, like Applebrook, the Pulte development in Applebrook, or the Applebrook Preserve over by the golf course. Those are twin homes. Those can actually go there today and single family. If this district comes to fruition, you can have townhouses, and that's 8-acre parcel at, how many, 4? Okay, so.
Gotcha. All right, that clarifies that for me. And would you consider adopting just portions of this? I mean, Jen, you said feel like there's some tweaking that needs to be done to this. Does this have to be voted upon in whole, or would you then possibly be looking at different portions of it?
The point of this meeting is to get input so that we can tweak it. So, there is no intention tonight of passing it one way or other, because we're still trying to get information.
One difference is if they developed it with a, let's go back to Piranha's property. You're right, they can do 1-acre lots and you will lose some for the roads. We also have an option where you can put the houses real close together, they have open space, and you would get full 15 units on there. However, under some of those rules, there's no buffer. If they did under this, it'd be a 50-foot buffer yard between the new houses or the apartments, or the townhouses, excuse me, and the adjoining properties. So there will be a separation. There's a trade-off there.
Well, I appreciate the clarification. And just from my thinking through this and watching this, since we talked about the Lewis property, I mean, that's really got me involved with all of this. What I'm hearing from people in the township, they want less, not more, as far as residences are concerned because of our congestion already. So, I mean, that seems to be a theme that keeps coming up throughout all of these meetings, is that people are concerned about the population density in East Goshen Township. So that's something that I personally will be watching for this. I know people have wanted, I have a 31-year-old who was 3 when we started talking about getting these trails to get everybody together so that we could, I am all for that. I think, yeah, it'd be great. I came from a place called Brandermill, Virginia, where it was considered for many, many years the best planned community in the United States. And the one thing that made that the best planned community were the trails that connected everything to the town center. The trails are fabulous. I think, people are finally realizing that. So yeah, I see that part of the plan. It's just the population density. I've been hearing this since going back in, how long ago did we start with the Lewis property? So that's
I've been hearing it for 40 years.
Very good.
When I lived in Marydale, and Pin Oaks was very unhappy when Marydale was built because it was too many people and they wanted to block the road so that we couldn't drive down Barker Drive. So this is nothing new.
It isn't anything new, and I admit that the property that I live on, I used to ride horses there when I was a child, and I now live in a housing development there. So I get that, but I think it's what I keep hearing, and that's all I would like to keep in your, the balance, exactly. That's exactly what I'm looking at. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, Christina Morley from Pin Oaks. I came in a few minutes late, so I didn't catch the very beginning of your presentation, but I believe that it said that this process started in 2015 and 2017.
So, to talk about the TND, we actually started early 2018, but the planning that's gone into identifying the goals and objectives to get us here began in 2011-12 and started with a number of different plans that we've gone through to identify the objectives and needs for the township moving forward.
The reason why I'm asking about that is because, as I think everybody here in the room knows, the township experienced a very big sentinel event in 2017 with the pipeline coming through. which really transformed our township on a number of different levels. And I think that today we are still struggling to learn to live alongside that new piece of infrastructure that is bisecting the middle of our town. And as a member of the Pipeline Task Force, I can tell you that we work every month to address many of the very serious safety issues that this township is facing. And so as I was listening to the presentation and reading many of the bullet points there, I was very disturbed by the prospect of bringing more people and more businesses. What really disturbed me was the child care centers that were listed on there, to a place that we still have not found solutions for caring for and accounting for the people that are already here. I always get the sense that this is more like putting kindling on a fire. And my personal opinion is that we have no business doing any of these activities until we have solved the very real and very serious safety challenges for the people that are already here, instead of trying to attract more people here when we haven't solved the problems that are facing us right now.
Thank you so much.
I have one more suggestion for the board. Because this planning started before that, and in support of what the previous speaker just said, I also am seeing many comments on social media about not developing this area, that people moved here because they didn't want this to be an Exton. They didn't want to live in the borough. They don't want to live in Delaware County. And in July, Mr. Committa, I remember reading a news article about your work with Kennett Township, where you increased their open space from 20% to 30%. And as part of that project, it included the results of a questionnaire that went out to the Kennett residents. And I think that it would be very prudent for the board to do a survey right now of what the residents are feeling about this particular project, and to get an idea of, do we want more development or do we want more open space? Thank you.
Good point. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Leo Sinclair. How are we doing? And by the way,
Got it.
Go ahead and right now.
Yeah, good.
Tom, would you say you're the grandfather of this? You're roundabout way. Godfather, I mean, yes, thank you. That's fine.
Grandfather will be 1 year old on Halloween, so I am a grandfather.
Okay. I grew up in Philadelphia, and back when I was a kid, I had this one person, who I really loved. I mean, he was an idol of mine. And his name was Bacon. Edmund Bacon was a developer who envisioned what Philadelphia should be.
He was a planner.
He was a planner. He was an architect.
I knew him.
I met him once. He's the father of Kevin Bacon. He saved historical Philadelphia. I mean, it was incredible what had happened to Philadelphia then. He also built 30th Street, built the post office and so forth. Incredible. Tom, I kind of put you almost in the same boat, not quite, but you're there. I partly agree, partly disagree with what's going on here in East Goshen. And I find it hard to believe. First of all, I haven't talked in a long time in the public, so I'm kind of nervous. I have a couple questions. One thing that jumped to my attention right away was public utility facility. Could somebody explain exactly what that is? Because that's going to be part of this zone, inside this zone here.
It's already allowed,
Right, it's already allowed.
already allowed.
Right. Now, there are things that could, in fact, no longer be allowed based on this overlay. Is that correct? Would it be right to say that?
What we tried not to do is wind up with a bunch of non-conforming uses,
Non-conforming uses.
which would cause So, planning difficulties in the future. So if
Okay.
something was already there, we didn't want to remove it and cause, problems.
Like grandfather clause?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump forward and then come back. The Sunoco gas station. Technically speaking, with the new overlay, if the Sunoco gas station were to shutter tomorrow, and no one wants to buy it right away, let's say someone says, you know what, I want to buy that land. Don't want a gas station, I want to build something. But they're second guessing. At any juncture, would you say that gas station could no longer be a gas station at the current way it's developed? For instance, pumps in the front?
You talk about abandonment of a use, and it's very difficult for a municipality to demonstrate that Sunoco, gas station has abandoned use. They would almost have to put an ad in the paper and signs up saying, we are hereby abandoning this use, and no longer it's gonna be a gas station.
Okay, so I'm kind of want to go back to this public utilities facility. I don't know exactly what that definition is.
It's a defined term, and it's basically, a PICO facility, not Verizon, Bell Telephone, pipeline facility. It's
Township
that
pump
type of facility.
station.
Pump station,
We need
yeah.
a sewer pump.
You know where I'm going with this, okay? In essence, I mean, well, pumping station, okay? We have
Sanitary sewer.
Okay, no pipelines, right?
I don't know
What
if
you
it-
understand is that already today, if this ordinance doesn't pass or doesn't go
Right,
forward,
but
it's already
here's what- okay,
allowed in this
Okay,
district.
I'm sorry, let me take a step back a minute then. Here's what I'm saying, very bluntly. If this ordinance were to be an overlay, what you're basically saying is, hey, we're gonna change the conformity. And what I'm basically getting to is, I'm asking you to perhaps take a second look at that public facility and see, is there a way we could block that out of this plan?
A public, municipality can regulate public. The municipality has limited control over public facilities. If a public, and I'm only talking about buildings, because that's the only thing we have any jurisdiction over. However, if a public utility goes to the Public Utility Commission and gets a certificate of need, they have the ability to put that facility in that municipality. That is what happened at the at the substation up at Rocky Hill. They went to the Public Utility Commission, they got a certificate of need, and they got the ability to build that station. But if it's anything other than a building, we do not have any jurisdiction over.
I was on planning commission at the time, and we did not want it to come, but we were unable to do anything.
Okay, well, then you answered the question I was looking for, okay, and answered what I want to know. Okay, one question I do have left is, in your overlay, is it possible we can see those properties, perhaps there's none at all, but is there any properties that would not conform to the new overlay? No.
That's the whole idea is to get more uses in that area. So the map that John had up there, that they're all existing uses can continue, and it's providing for additional uses in that overlay.
So there's no way you can turn around and say that the current building can no longer exist? Okay,
No, you
No.
can't take that
No,
person's
you
right
can't do
away.
that.
cool, thank you.
They have right.
Thanks, Dan.
Dan Truitt, 1430 Grand Oak Lane. I won't give you the speech from last week, but I really don't want you to change the core character of the town. I got some very specific points I wanted to make. First of all, I would hope that it'd be a slam dunk no for any ordinance change that would allow apartment buildings along that stretch, given what happened. And it's clear that folks just don't want that. We don't want those kinds of buildings in this area. And if you make it part of the standard zoning where Mr. Hankin doesn't even have to come to us and ask for a change, I mean, I think it's a little naive to assume that, well, just because so-and-so doesn't have any intentions of selling, that they won't sell. I mean, anybody that's played Monopoly as a kid knows that,
Dan,
you can convince people to sell their properties if you offer them
but
enough
Dan,
money.
this is not that same stretch of property that we looked at last week.
I understand it's the
this is
same
the-
kind of building.
This is a very limited stretch on Paoli Pike. And it is not, last week we were looking at all the Hicks properties down there and so forth. This is you know, I'm not saying how anybody's gonna vote, but I'm just saying
No.
this is a very different situation.
I don't think it's different at all. We're talking, there, it was an apartment building, it was a little bit more remote from the town center. Now you're talking about opening the door to somebody putting one dead center in the middle. And as I said, I think, if you think that some of those
Yes,
property owners
Yes,
won't
you're
sell,
Yes.
You're correct.
you're naive. I mean, if somebody came in and offered me $2 million for my property, probably sell it, move somewhere else in East Goshen. Everybody's got a number where they'll say, you know what, I really like this house, but.
You're correct, though. That is the intent here relative to establishing this center, whether you buy into it or not.
Yes.
That's why there's a defined corridor to create this point of interest and activity. And that's why, particularly in my particular vote regarding that zoning amendment last week or last month, and the potential development behind it, it was in the wrong location.
Right.
And I said to folks, if the complex were proposed within the fledgling Goshenville Town Center, I'd be taking a very close look at it, because that's the intent of the planning effort here over the prior years before I was here. And that's the interest. Now, if you're not interested in a town center, I understand that too. I'm interested in it. I still have some ambivalence about it, but location-wise, that proposal last month for this recent period, it was in the wrong location. It would have been a detraction, let alone a whole lot of other things. But in the town center as proposed, it's a different concept to create a corridor of interest within a limited scope, Route Road to 352.
So I'm just providing specific input to the specific proposal. I think you'll find that a majority of residents would be even less inclined to support an apartment building like Mr. Hankin proposed further into the center. I mean, I think it's actually worse than where he wanted to put it. The second thing, the second objection that I'd like to point to make is the build to line. You're talking about 15 feet, and this goes to what Carmen was talking about earlier. 15 feet, Janet, is about from where you're sitting to where I'm standing.
That was not even that much.
Yeah, imagine that wall 2.5 times as tall, that far away from you when you're standing, you know, this far away from you when you're standing in the street or in the right of way on the path or whatever. It's just too close. And you've said to me before, well, we're not changing the heights of the buildings. That's true. But if I wanted to go and buy that old M&T Bank building today and put a computer repair shop in there, and it wasn't mixed use, I'm going to put a single-story building in there for my computer repair shop. If it's mixed use, now I have a reason to build to 30 feet. And I can build it 15 feet away from the street or the trail. So that has the combined effect of bringing the buildings closer to the road and making them taller. And whether it'll happen over 2 years, 5 years, 15 years, I think it'll happen a lot faster than a lot of you think. And that will fundamentally change the character of the center of our town. I think that's the role.
And that's the relationship to this traditional neighborhood development as recognized in the municipality's planning code to try and recreate some of the atmosphere associated with call that legislative change in the MPC a move towards a nostalgic move to try and recreate some town center feels where you've got mixed use, you've got a closer proximity, and you create more of a village concept. That's what this is all about. That's the intent, whether you support that or not. That is, without a doubt, that's the intent. So the closer setbacks are narrower, creating a closer environment. That's what the TND is all about.
Another example, I mean, I've seen it in the renderings on the website. The corner where CVS is now, in the rendering, there's a 3-story building 15 feet away from the road. Right? When Mastardi's, I think that was the name of the Scartosi. When the nursery moved out and the CVS moved in, no big deal. It stayed just as far away from the road. It was a 1-story building. It didn't fundamentally change the character.
I like the nursery myself.
I did too. So that's all. Those are my 2 primary objectives: a 15-foot setback combined with the mixed use, putting apartments above stores. Now people have a reason to build taller buildings, and they're going to put them closer to the road because you set it at 15 feet. That's just a fundamental. It'll look completely different, and it'll happen a lot faster than you think.
Thank you, Dan.
I'm Michelle Truitt, 1430 Granite Plain. I have a couple of points to make. One point being that I'm concerned that this particular TND overlay might be intended to be only for this particular corridor. My concern is if another developer would come in and potentially try to apply this zoning to another section of our township.
That would require going through the
All of
same
this.
hearing process that we're going through now.
Yeah, that would be, they could make a request, and then we'd have the same kind of process, Michelle, that we had last,
Okay, so would not be able to apply, that's fine. But the Goshen Corporate Park, is this or is this not in consideration in the TND 1 or 2?
No, it is not.
There's
So
two parcels.
The executive center is what I meant to say.
Yeah,
Yes.
the executive center is included, but not the.
There are two parcels in the BP district that are included in the TND one, and it's the Sunoco gas station
Right.
and the
Executive
Ocean
park.
Executive Center.
So the executive center, if that were to be, if all of those people got together and sold their property to the highest bidder, how densely populated could that potentially be with apartments above some type of storefront? What would that parcel allow for?
So I don't know the acreage of that lot, but I think it's around 7 acres.
7 acres,
It's like a 7-acre lot, so 4 lots per acre, so 28 units above commercial.
And it also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the first speaker actually asked, could that actually be turned into an apartment complex? Yes, okay. And I have for you today a petition that 1,942 plus people have signed. Over 775 of these people are verified East Goshen residents using Chester County Voter Services records. And I have their comments to submit for the record. This does apply because this petition was specifically developed so that it would be applicable for the TND overlay and for the other issue from last week. So I will respectfully submit that. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Brian Sweet, 646 Meadow Drive. Similar to the Hankin project last week, I'm concerned with the density of housing in the overlays. So the TND, we touched on this a little bit, but
Stay into the mic, Brian.
the TND 1 overlay increases the apartment density in East Goshen that we typically see in other places in East Goshen, increases by like 10%. So it's not a lot, maybe it's manageable, but I don't know why we would automatically increase that in this area. TND 2 more than doubles the density of single-family houses relative to what is allowed in R2 in East Goshen. So that's quite a lot. And I think that's what people's angst that you hear about residential development in these areas, it's not just we're allowing what's permitted today to go there, we're increasing that density. I think we've heard from a lot of people that they don't like it. So I think that should be, we should reconsider that in the ordinance as they prepare. That being said, I want to thank the board and the planning commission for all the work that they did in putting the plan together. I know a lot of people feel that the current Paley Pike corridor best reflects the kind of community that East Goshen is. So we have an abandoned convenience store, we've got a tiny cramped convenience store, we've got property with equipment and wood strewn about the yard, and we've got an abandoned bank. The corridor today is a result of developers coming into East Goshen and telling us what our town is going to look like.
Yeah.
I think it's better for us to put together a plan so developers know the way we want our town to look like, not allow the random market to guide them.
Good comment. Thank you.
Kevin Perot, 1416 Grand Oak Lane. Good evening. I want to talk about the trail. East Goshen proposed Goshenville Trail. The idea has reportedly been simmering for over 30 years. I've heard different numbers of years, but it's a long time. But now with the funding, it appears to be nearing fruition. Personally, I think the idea is terrible. It's a great waste of money.
an inconvenience, and a duplication. We're informed that people will flock to the trail in Goshenville to walk and shop. We're informed that the powers envision this trail extending from Philadelphia to Harrisburg, with throngs of people stopping in Goshenville to use the trail for shopping, exercise, entertainment, and food. While we've been thinking about the trail for all this time, others have actually done it. And I refer to the right-of-way up north of Lancaster Pike. There's already a nearby part of this their proposal is a 750-mile trail. Chester Valley multi-use rail to trail. It roughly follows the US routes 30 and 202 in the right-of-way of the former railroad. The circuit will be 750 miles trail network throughout greater Philadelphia. Excuse me. There is a crossing on Ship Road just north of 30. The railroad bed is quite wide, and there's a light at Ship Road. As a pedestrian or cyclist approaches the Ship Road crossing, about 100 feet distant, warning lights start flashing. You may stop way too early because of the foliage. You can't see down the right away until you get right there. So you then see that you've stopped the pedestrians 100 feet away. So anyway, but the foliage visions are strict. The idea that people will flock to Goshenville Trail for their shopping is ludicrous. Pedestrians will not be able to carry their purchases because their car will be some distance away. Crossing from side to side will only exacerbate the traffic problems. There's proposals to have a number of crosswalks, or to get from one side, the trail is on both sides of Paoli Pike, the proposal. Eventually it'll get worked out, it'll be one side for this part and then one side somewhere else. In any case, you have to go back and forth. They had a lot of problems discussing a light on Meadow Lane. There's at least 2 lights that are going to be in this proposal just in Goshenville. All right, I was in India and many places around the world. In India, this problem is solved because there are many young boys more than willing to carry your bags as you shop. They may be able to give you advice on where you could get purchase items. They carry the bags, you're free to shop. Also in Venice, I was there many times. Likewise, it's easy to rent a gondola by the half day, the whole day, whatever you want. The gondola follows you around as you shop. You get these big bundles, you put it in the gondola, you go back, you're free to shop. All right, so, and the same thing exists in the Kapali Çarşı, which is known as a covered bazaar in Istanbul. Same idea. People are there willing to help you. They'll carry it. I tell you, they do it for centenes. They're not charging a lot of money. It's whatever you want to give them. So, without a way for customers to be safely free of the burden of their packages, much of the advertised shopping will not occur, in my opinion. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you.
I'm John Herzog.
Let me,
Hey, John.
just a second. I gotta respond to that because I'm the one that probably knows more about this than anybody else. The county, several years ago, approved a mid-county trail system. And in that trail system is what you see getting developed here in East Goshen. Where it went into one of the tentacles of it, the trail system goes into Westchester. It then goes either to Downingtown or to Exton. That's what it's supposed to do at the end of the day. We have been very fortunate in being the first one to address the situation. And it came about because I asked the question, is it prudent to do this first as opposed to waiting? And the answer was yes, because if you do, you will get the most grants, which has been the case. So a good bit of this trail is being funded by grant money. Now, that said, the comprehensive plan, the plans for the Paoli Pike, the plans for the central Paoli Pike, the master plan, All that was developed, as Mark has talked about tonight, over the last 4 years or so, with resident input. Now, I'm not sure who here was there, but there was much discussion about this. And out of that, there was also, by the way, a futures committee in East Goshen Township, among many others. And they are very wrapped up in approving the town center concept, which is part of the comprehensive plan. So the trails that were just mentioned, the Mid-County Trail is the one that you mentioned with all the ship road and everything else. At the end of the day, that trail will go from Philadelphia to Harrisburg. Now, there is hundreds of miles of trails between East Goshen and Montgomery County now. I'm not sure what the total will be after the fact, not counting the trails that will get into the principal trail. I'm talking about the major trails. You can go virtually everywhere if you know what you're doing. Well, you certainly can go to Philadelphia. That's very easy. And you can go out as far as Downingtown, I think, now. But there's a great deal of effort made on trails all over the place. And we have had people tell us, if you're going to try to make a town center here, which is what the goal is, that you have to get people here. They either got to come or they got to be here in the first place. And it's a lot easier to have them here in the first place than it is to try to get them to come. So hence, some of this development is going to take place. Now, there is very few lots left to develop in East Goshen Township, and it's not very difficult to figure out under the current zoning what would be permissible on that particular lot and what type of facility would be permissible in that type of lot. There's not many. So all the conversation about these multi-apartment complexes going up is not going to happen in East Goshen. What we're talking about here is probably four apartment units, I think, for one of these buildings. You don't have, this is very small in the great scheme of things. But a decision was made by many people, including this board, to develop a town center over a period of time. There has been conversation tonight about this is not going to be that difficult to do. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult to do because there isn't going to be a developer that comes in here, even if one lot is up for sale, that developer is going to grab this and land bank it to wait for the next one or the next one, the next one to build a comprehensive complex along here. We'd be lucky if we can get one at a time. Now, the bank that everybody talks about is 1 acre. There's limited parking, to say the least. The odds of something going in there of any kind of size is minimal. It just isn't going to happen. So the simple fact of the matter is, we understand what people are saying. We understand what took place last week at the corporate park. We understand all that. But some of this stuff is really beyond us, and you have to take advantage of it or not take advantage of it. But most of it, you want to take advantage of it because you're part of the game. So we have spent a lot of time, and I want to thank just a couple members of the planning commission here. They're right over here down front. They've done a terrific job. Tom has done a terrific job advising us as the consultant. And if we are able to make this work, it is going to be a really something special that will distinguish East Goshen from other townships of similar size and similar layout, residential communities. It's a beautiful thing. We are not going to change East Goshen Township for a residential community to something else. We're not going to do that. And the simple fact of the matter is, right today, we are a very desirable township. We have to maintain that desirability. And I have said this before, you cannot stop development because if you do, you will go backwards. And our property values will be affected by this. So we understand what is necessary to protect you people in all ways. We are not trying to make this community something different than what it is. But the fact that you can get a town center, if it was to work, is really something special. And in due time, I hope, the odds of me being around to see this are pretty slim. But there are some that are in this room that may see some activity relative to this. And I want to thank Mark, I want to thank the Planning Commission, and I want to thank those that have put so much time into this And it's been their life for 3 or 4 years.
I just want to pick up on one thing, and I'll play off the comment that I think Brian Sweet made. We're trying to strategically manage the future development in this particular corridor, not and manage developers. I think we did that last month, earlier this month, and I think this is an effort to do that. I also agree with Marty that the likelihood of something dramatic occurring in this Goshenville Town Center, this corridor, this limited portion of the Paoli Pike corridor over the course of the next 15, 20 years, some amazing transformation, I'm not sure it's going to occur. So that's part of my ambivalence anyway. But I think that this is a strategic effort. There's been a lot of planning. There's been a lot of public comment over time. And I think there's validity to it. I'm not overly concerned at this point in time about extreme high density with what I've seen in these overlay districts coming into this particular corridor. But it is a long-term proposition, and if it happens, I'm going to be more surprised than perhaps others when we have West Goshen Shopping Center, its activity center there, the borough to the west, and then we have Malvern and Paoli to the east. I'm not sure how much inertia we have, whether we call it the Goshenville Town Center or not, and with what we have available in this corridor. So a dramatic change over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I don't see it. But I do think the trails are an important element, and I think they are setting up for future generations in a world that's going to be a lot different. And I think there's going to be value in trails and connectivity, which is a generational process to connect. And it takes years and years of a lot of coordination, a lot of dollars, and cooperation. And that's just going to continue, whether there are these broad, long circuit trails like the Chester Valley Trail and its connectivity with towards the city of Philadelphia and all the way out to Harrisburg. It's a generation ahead. But I think here locally, Paoli Pike Corridor Trail, I think it's going to be a benefit. I think it's going to be valued, whether it's going to bring people to the Goshenville Town Center. I'm ambivalent about that. But I think the trail is going to be a good one. I think a lot of people are going to use it.
Just a quick clarification. I'm a member of the Greater Philadelphia Bicycle Coalition. The 750 miles of trail is part of the Complete Circuit project. Our trail is not part of that project, and our trail will actually not connect to the 750 miles of trail. So I just wanted to clarify that. The purpose of our trail is to provide connectivity for the residents of East Goshen Township. That's right.
Your turn.
Are you sure?
I'm hoping.
I'm John Herzog. I live on Cornwallis Drive. Can you point that out, Mark? Mark has hunted on the back of my property, so I think he knows where it is, but, no, it's further down, further down. Yeah. And, it's about less than half a mile from the corridor, as we call it. I was just gonna say I don't like it, it's too close. I envy Brian because, the Hankin project got voted down, and it looks like you're moving the Hankin project into my neighborhood now. But then I listened to Marty's comments, and I have a lot of respect for a guy that's been around 18 years. But I've got to say, I don't agree. I mean, on the committee, on the supervisor committee. I know you've been around a little bit longer.
I'm 18 years on the board, he's 24.
Oh, 24, I've been corrected, that's good.
And over here, we're still right behind you.
Because I'm gonna do some correcting here.
Correct this, John. In 2 years, it would be 36 years. And I've seen a lot of stuff happen in East Goshen.
Anybody that dedicates that
good.
amount of time, you'd like for not.
Let John talk. I will. First, I just want everybody to remember this. Virtually every development that we have had since 1986, when it was proposed, the same argument that's being made today about what's going to happen in East Goshen was made then. And East Goshen today is one of the best communities in Chester County, if not the best community to live in. And as a consequence, it's due to the fact that the supervisors, all of them, that have been in play here for a long period of time, have recognized what needs to be done and have done it. And they're very proactive in that, and we're lucky to have the staff that we have because they're very cooperative in what we're trying to do. So I just hope that everybody understands that this has taken a lot of thought and preparation, and we are not trying to do something that you do not want to have done.
Well, I disagree with that. And by the way, 36 years may be too long. Let me say, first of all, the quotes I have on my notes say resident input. How many of the residents here have had input into the creation of this town center?
How many people?
We have had a number of meetings.
You've had meetings,
We've
you've had
had
requests.
meetings with.
I was at the
public
meeting 2
input,
weeks ago,
But that wasn't the meeting.
and everybody in the audience was against the development. Weren't they? In fact, it was voted down. because-
John, that's not what we're talking about. For the last 2 years, the township meetings have been public, the planning commission meetings have been public. And
The website has been.
you should not imply that citizens have not had an opportunity to provide input.
They've had an opportunity to ask questions, I admit that. But nobody has said, I approve of it. Nobody has had a vote, and there has been no resident input supporting this project. Well, frankly, I think it ought to be on the ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You cannot do that in a municipality, and we're a representative form of government.
That you are not representing the will of these people.
Yeah, well, how?
John,
These
there are-
people.
You know,
there are 8,000
David, out of all
Yeah,
respect,
thanks, John.
let's not get into an argument with him because you just said a few things tonight out of shots, and I don't appreciate.
Out of frustration.
No, not frustration.
Yes, frustration.
Cheap shots. Pardon me, sir. I'm entitled to my opinion. I don't want to get into a tizzy here. Cheap shots and not called for the amount of people that put so many hours, not me, but the amount of people that put so many hours in here, for you to say some of the words you just said tonight, that's why this country is as bad as it is, because of that terminology.
Listen, if you can't take criticism, you shouldn't be supervisors.
It's not me. I can take all the criticism in the world. Don't do cheap shots to people. It wasn't me, it was the Marty.
Okay, well, do you have any other
I
comments?
have no more comments.
Okay, well, thank you
I'll
so
stand
much.
here if you want to attack me.
No, I don't want to attack you. I want to hear everybody else who had, we're getting towards my 9 o'clock cutoff, so I'd like to make sure we hear everyone who has something
Hi,
to
I'm
say.
Mary Wilson, I live at Summit House. I've already been here going on 5 years. I've come to several meetings, not a whole lot. I haven't said much. But where I came from, there's been a lot of development in Newtown Square. And it was awful, awful. The water, the sewage has gone up tremendously in the township. Our friends are still there and they can't stand it. They want to move out. I'm glad I'm out, but I'm sorry to hear that this is all going on. I don't like the fact the town center, my one daughter lived in Exton, that was with Hankin, and they said, oh, you're gonna have a lot of traffic come through. She didn't have traffic come through. She couldn't even put a sign out to sell what she was selling. How the heck are you going to do this? I don't get it. It's just not worth it. She had to leave. She couldn't stay there anymore. There's not a whole lot of stores in that storefront where she was because the traffic didn't come through. There's a lot of houses out there, let me tell you, and it's beautiful. But the traffic is not, it doesn't bring businesses. People are going to Target, Costco, Sam's, you name it, they go there. They're not coming to these little shops. They just don't. My other question, that was a statement, but my question is about this trail thing that you want to put in. I want to know something. My husband is pretty handicapped. If he wants to take a ride up on the trail with his scooter, is he going to be able to use it? Has
Yes.
anybody thought about that?
Yes.
Furthermore,
Yes.
Furthermore,
Yes, the answer
what
is
about the weather?
So the township has already approved a maintenance plan for the trail, and it will have full year-round maintenance,
Okay.
including snow removal and ice removal.
Well, what about our park over here, our beautiful park? Isn't there snow removal over there?
The Apple
And the
Brook
parking
Park
lot?
and the current park will also be on the same maintenance schedule.
So why do all this? It's bringing the cost, but how much is this gonna cost us? In taxes, this has gotta cost us a lot of money.
It is.
Each and every one of us are paying taxes here,
That's
or
right.
we wouldn't be here. It's gonna cost more money than what you realize. Newtown Square taxes have gone up with all the development and all that, the Ellis Estate and everything. It's gone up.
Without a doubt. The taxes are an issue.
Yeah,
My goodness, I think about the Westchester Area School District tax, which is at close to 20 mils. We're at 1.25 mils for the services that are available here to our residents and the future plans we're trying to make. 20 mils, that's a lot of dollars that we pay. I don't think, and I'm scolding myself. I've not been to one, I've not been to one Westchester Area School District meeting,
And I don't know what the tax bill is I pay each year, maybe $6,000. Over 35 years I've been here in East Goshen Township. My kids didn't go to school in the school district. That's a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
Very expensive. 20 mils. Well, here it's 1.25 mil. Our chief financial officer has indicated that right now, with the balance of land use we have, our tax base, good earned income of the successful residents in the township, our AAA bond rating, our credit rating remains one of the best in the state.
And I'm
Our
proud to be
finances in
part
good
of
order.
that.
It's expensive though. Our police, we spend $3.5 million plus a year on our police department. With our partners, $7+ million. Services at local government and in an exceptional or a premier quality, first class quality, are expensive these years. Utilities are expensive. It's just the reality of the world that we're moving into. The Chester County landscapes, I said it multiple times, the new Landscapes 3 plan in the next 20 years is proposing, indicating, projecting 150,000 new residents in Chester County. We already have 500,000. Where's the balance? I don't know, but we're trying to protect it and manage it strategically here in East Goshen so that the vision that Chester County has and with their Landscapes 3 plan is protected and somewhat insulated in East Goshen, and we preserve what we have here. There are going to be changes. There's no doubt about it. And as I agree with Mr. Shane, we can't sit back with all of them. But the trail, yes, it's expensive. We've obtained $3.5 million worth of grants, thanks to an excellent staff. But it's still going to be $3.5 million on top of that. It's expensive. But we think it's part of an important element of our infrastructure and our interface with residents and our pedestrian and future multimodal opportunities in these generations ahead.
Well, I object to it. I object to the
I
whole thing.
respect
I
it.
really do. I feel that there's a lot of people that I've talked to about this and they don't like it. They can't come out, but they don't like it either. And as far as the trail is concerned, go across the park. The park is really lovely to walk in.
Yes, it is.
You know, you can do that. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting towards the end. We have two people.
I know, I was up, but you know what?
No, I'm not asking you not to go up. I'm just saying, if anybody else is interested in speaking, please get online because we're getting towards the end and I'm gonna close off public comment.
I'm trying to be as fast as possible. I didn't want to go down this road, but I'm kind of forced to do it so. So far to date, money spent on this project is $1.6 million. What do we have to show for that?
This is public comment on the TND 1 and TND.
See, that's
It
just
has
it.
nothing-
The trail is through
Yeah,
this.
we're not talking about the trail tonight. We're talking about
We
TND
just
1
did.
and TND 2, so let's have our comments restricted.
All right,
to
I'll
that.
simply comment, Leo, that 1.6 million, whatever John has provided, very accessibly, as soon as you asked, he provided it. It's all available. It has to do with the preparation, the extensive preparation and planning, the engineering, the easements, et cetera, that go into the so-called expensive soft costs to get, now that we finally broken ground to start to get these segments. So the money has been accountable. It's the details are there. It's been in public view with proposals and public bidding and acceptance of proposals. So that's accountable.
Listen, I'm sorry, forgive me, but I don't mean to be rude here, but the elephant in the room has to be spoken about, okay? For me, it's dollars and cents. Majority of us taxpayers is dollars and cents. Now, I'm all for development to some extent, but when it comes to costs, I start to second guess it. Let's take this trail now and put it back into this location. This is where I want to go back into. In those locations along the route there right now, how many of those properties are giving you problems about easements right now? 0. So all the properties along that route right now are saying, go ahead.
That's true. We have easements for everyone.
Thank you. That's what, okay. Now, the property that does not seem to be playing ball right now is the property that was spoken about just last week regarding Hankins property now, if you call it Hankins property. There could be potential litigation coming down the road eventually. Could be potentially another $1 million. So,
For what?
legal fees, so forth and so on.
For what?
For easement rights. Oh, right, eminent domain, that's right, I forgot to use eminent domain.
Well, hold on, how do you get $1 million?
No, it's being on $1 million. What I'm trying to say is, okay, let's do this. Take a step back then. Give me, I have the numbers here. Tell the public right now how much this project costs at total. And then take a step back and tell me how much money we borrowed so far in bonds that will eventually be paid off.
Sure, Leah, this was the, I answered the question in your email.
They want to know,
If you'd
I
like
mean,
me to summarize what I said in the email, is right now, so that it gets a little complicated, and bear with me for a second, because there's one segment of the trail that we don't have grant funding for, so the board has not formally committed to it. That's the section what we call segment B. It runs from Ellis Lane to Reservoir Road, and it runs through a wetland. So it's just gonna be the most logistically complicated.
Yeah.
So the board is not committed to that section. So if you take out the construction only piece, not talking engineering, but just the hard cost of construction on that segment, the board is committed to $6.6 million in expenses. The township 2.5 years ago, we got a AAA bond rating. We're one of only 7 municipalities in the state that have a AAA rating from Moody's. As a result, we were able to access capital markets the lowest possible rates. We borrowed a lot of, well, over $8 million, but the purpose of that was for a whole variety of projects, one of which was the trail. Of that, of $8.1 million that we borrowed, $3 million of that was for the soft costs of the trail. So right now, if you exclude as I said before, if you exclude the construction costs of segment B, we're looking at about $6.6 million for all the engineering, all the rights of way, all the utility relocations, plus construction, except segment B. So we have, as I said, $3.6 million in grants versus $3 million in bond proceeds. So right now it's about 55% grant funded, 45% bond funded. Taxpayer funded. And then, however, we're applying for grants for the construction portion for segment B, and that would be full funding through grants of that section. The board has been very clear, we need full funding of construction costs in order to proceed. Now that segment, we applied for $2.8 million in grants for that segment, so that would bump the total project cost up to, I think, $9.4 million. So, but we still say with taxpayer funding from the bond proceeds of $3 million. So if we meet those targets, we're talking about a project that's 68% grant funded compared to 32% taxpayer dollar funded. So that's a pretty remarkable, share between non-local taxpayer dollars and other sources.
Dan, Truitt again, 1430 Grand Oak Lane. I apologize for coming up twice. No opinion this time, just some rapid fire questions. The planning commission meetings, when we talked about, when we came up with this comprehensive plan and so forth, how many residents were at those meetings? I mean, typically you come to a planning commission meeting, it's the planning commission folks, the supervisors, and there's no one else in the audience. Do you have a count of how many residents were at any of these meetings?
So I was out those meetings, and during during the public input and brainstorming sessions, we'd have 15 to 20 residents in the room.
Just a question. Mike, you mentioned the 1.25 mil tax that we have here in the township. Does West Goshen have one?
West Goshen's, I think, is 2.0.
West Goshen's is 2.0.
Now, our 1.25, wasn't it supposed to go away last year? I think when we started that 15 years ago, it was supposed to be to pay for Applebrook and part of it was.
You would also be remiss in
bonds.
not saying that we haven't had a tax increase in the township in 17 years.
Since it was.
17 years, since it was incepted. So just so everyone
Pretty
knows that.
specific recollection that
What was the
tax
last
was supposed to
thing
be
you bought?
temporary for 15 years.
What was the last thing you bought that hasn't gone up?
Right.
Because
one
of
person
the
at a time.
Of the tax market,
One
it was
person.
left in place, so
Pardon
we
me.
didn't have to raise taxes.
We just kept it going. I mean, when we had to vote on something 16, 17 years ago, was it, did we vote to approve the bonds or?
The voters voted to allow the township to incur electoral debt. In other words, the township is allowed to incur debt up to a certain amount. Any amount above that is electoral debt. In order to determine whether or not people wanted the township to spend township money to buy open space, we put the question on about, are you in favor of the township incurring electoral debt? The idea was to get a sense of whether the township residents wanted us to borrow money to buy open space. That motion and that question passed.
Okay, we didn't have to do that this time for the trail?
This is what the township, the debt John is talking about is not electoral debt.
It's within the.
It's within the borrowing limits of the township.
All right, good, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Hello, my name is Suzanne Carson Petrick. I live at 628 Thorncroft Drive. I've been in East Goshen for 28 years. I've attended several of your meetings over the last couple months, and it seems the opinions, what residents are most concerned about is apartments. And your concept here, obviously there's people who put a lot of time and money and effort into this, and that's to be appreciated. But I counted 32 people here tonight, and it sounds like less at some of these other meetings. So I think input from residents doesn't stop in the initial drafts. You have to continue to get input. And my feeling from the last 4 or 5 meetings I've attended is apartments scare people, and that's really an area to consider as you move forward. That's what people are concerned about. More traffic, more people, and that's my takeaway from these last few meetings. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Dean, 1252 Upton Circle. And I think I spoke last time we were talking about this overlay, but on TD2, the build to line is 20 feet. What would it be without the build to line?
Currently, there's a front yard setback, and I think it's
35, maybe 40 feet, depending on what type of development they build.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that
What
build to
district?
line, putting up residential buildings so close to the road. I mean, it kind of reminds me of what's at the foot of 352 and Lancaster Pike.
Yep, right.
Well, those things are right on the road.
Yep.
And when we go into these other townships, these buildings are right on the road.
Yep.
So I know this is less density than that, but that's right on the road, and it's just hideous. So I would just encourage you to revisit that, and maybe just let TD2 go and just keep the current density we have for residential housing. My thought there on that one. Also on the build 2 lines on TD1. We talked about the CVS, how nice that is. It's got trees, it's set back in there, and you hardly know it's there. And this TD1 is like a total shift from that. It's like there's going to be no room for trees along the road. We're going to put these hard buildings up close to the road. And I think that just changes the character of the township. So that's my first comment on TD1. And second comment on TD1, we used to have a place in Ocean City, and they wrestled with this apartment on top and commercial on bottom thing just outside their core business district. If you go down Asbury farther south, they've got all these empty storefronts and then apartments above. was very lucrative for the developers to come in and rehab these things because the revenue off the apartments was phenomenal, and just keep the storefronts empty. And so I don't know if that's a possibility here, but I can kind of see that. If you're talking 16 units per acre on apartments.
That's correct.
In the TD one. So I you know, the heck with the retail part of it, you know, it probably makes sense if you can buy the property, right, just to build it, put the apartments in and just keep the lower thing, it'll be empty, or just.
That's an option. You don't have to have the commercial on the first floor. But there's two different options. You can have commercial with dwellings above or full
Oh, so you
apartment.
can just put a straight 16 unit apartment.
That's right. That's the proposal as of right now.
Okay, well, unlike everybody else, I just encourage you to back away from the apartments. Thank you.
All right, last person. I'll be quick.
Don't take your time.
I'll be quick. I'm Kay Cow.
You can pull that right down to it. Fine, perfect.
Okay, I'm Kay Cow. I live at 916 North Chester Road. I will agree with these apartment things. Obviously, I live right off at 352. The Baracus property is right down from me. And my concerns is if that turns into condos, apartments. Have you
No
looked?
apartments. There's no apartments allowed in the TND two.
Well, all right.
Only townhomes
Well,
or
townhomes
or
would provide
multifamily.
how many residences if they did townhomes?
So 4 per acre.
And how many acres is that?
So 30, so about 32 units.
Okay, so you have 32 families that are gonna come in and out either on the North Chester Road or Paley Pike.
Right, all that will be
Has-
done in planning. We determine all how the entrances would work. Yeah.
I understand it. So has anybody, looked at how that affects traffic on 352 and Paley
That
Pike?
would be done later.
And that extra volume, what that's gonna do for all of us residents on Cornwallis Drive, on, Wineberry Lane and so forth, that have to travel 352.
Yes, so the developer will have to do that analysis and show that their development does not decrease this level of service at the intersections, and if it does, they'll have to mitigate those impacts.
So how would they mitigate that? Would the board be able to say, no, you can't put 36 residences?
No.
Not with traffic. Not with
Traffic can be used as a reason to deny an application.
Anywhere.
Okay, so
That's bad.
consider that, board, of how that's gonna affect
Sure.
the people that have lived in that area for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Okay.
I was asked to make a motion, and Janet stated at the head of this meeting that we would take these input from the comments that you made and have our staff and perhaps the planning commission take a look at this and come back with a revision to what we have before us tonight. And I would make a motion to that effect for the comments tonight to be considered as to which of those should be incorporated in the TND 1 and 2, and which should the others not be included. So I make a motion to that effect, and I would hope there was a second.
Yes, I'd second that to continue the study of it and the examination by the planning commission or staff.
Any other?
I just have one comment. I almost burst 4 blood vessels last week, so I'm going to be very calm on this. I think it requires further study. The concept I like. I do not like the fact that it opens the door for the potential, and I brought this up in my questions to Mark Gordon, for apartments, even though it is very limited in space. I do think we need to revisit this slightly, especially with the apartments. I think the residential's covered. I think the condos are covered. The apartments are the big worry that I have. It was last week, and it will be going forward, because it seems to be the thing to do nowadays is just get the rent while you can and the heck with everything else. So I will not be voting for this, Madam Chair, but that is the only reason, until I feel comfortable with the apartment end of it, which I think is too open-ended.
Any other comments?
The motion is to revise it.
Understand.
Bring it back.
I understand.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion is carried.
Thanks.
I think being that this is a one-issue meeting, I will open it up if there are any public comments on non-agenda items. This would be the time. Not seeing any, could we?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
So I'm Christina Morley, I'm on the pipeline task force. We have a meeting this Thursday, a meeting once a month, the last Thursday of the month. Would you like to see at least one of you at the pipeline task force meeting? Because some of them very real issues.